Forsaken's balancing is very interesting. It's a surprise that a topic, which can have so many different opinions and perspectives, is both so debatable and heated in the Forsaken community. But why am I even talking about Forsaken's balancing and decided to dedicate so much of my time to where I have made a 5,500 word document on Survivor's balancing alone? Well, it's mainly because I just want to see this game's balancing improve and personally just share my thoughts on this game's balancing. With how many things are unbalanced in this game, I'm hoping that with this video, the developers can see what I would like to suggest for each survivor and hopefully push the game in just a generally more balanced state. However, it is important to preface a couple things before getting into the true meat and potatoes of this video. One of those being my perspective on balancing. Perspective is very important when discussing balancing. Not only can it affect how strong certain survivors or killers are, but what changes should be made to make said characters very healthy and balanced. If you have the perspective that Forsaken's balancing should be catered towards beginners/intermediates, then certain characters will be adjusted to such level to create a healthy environment for that type of skill level. And of course the opposite is for high-end and above average levels of play. For this ranking, or well, video, I'll be assuming high tier levels of play to accurately describe how powerful a character can really be. This way, a character's power can't be outright denied just because the vast majority of players do not know how to use the character properly. However, this also does mean a lot of changes I'll be presenting are quite harsh to each character, and that isn't exactly what I'm trying to get at here. The reason why this tier list / video is being made is to help Forsaken's balancing go a step into the right direction. An important way to do such is a fundamental understanding of each character. I don't want to just say a character is overpowered, but why they are as well. This may seem obvious, but it is crucial for when making changes, and arguably for your balancing perspective too. Say, for example, a killer struggles to catch up due to their base stats not allowing them to. However, others incorrectly believe it is for another reason and push for a change which buffs the character's abilities instead. This doesn't change the character's fundamental flaws, but also putting them into a weird state of where they are both very strong and flawed. As well as this, a good basis of understanding can help measure out the extent of how harsh each change needs to be. This is more so tied with the balancing perspective, but say we are balancing around good but not perfect players, we can make changes which, while not entirely fixing the issues of the character, still point them into the right direction to put them into a good state of balancing, and then also fit the level of healthiness we want for the environment. The reason why I'm explaining this is simply because I want this video to be a basis of understanding of what is wrong with each character and what changes can be made to help fix those issues directly. Do bear in mind that this video is being made on the 4th of April 2026, so certain fundamental flaws of characters may change in the future or be circumvented by future balancing changes, but for the most part, because it's fundamental flaws, this won't be applied for a while. So, if someone on the Forsaken dev team were to watch this, they could measure the extent of which they wanted to change and implement it. Hopefully, this can make the characters feel more balanced and healthy, instead of some getting weird buffs which don't solve much, and can even make them more infuriating to play as or against. Right, now that all the boring stuff is out of the way, we can actually get on to the real tier list. Survivors. Arguably the core of this game's gameplay loop, are not the most honest, nor fair, to say the least. This is why I'm already starting my tier list at B tier, since I don't firmly believe that if any character is used incorrectly, that you are a detriment to the team. No matter what, really, you're always going to be benefiting the team by, for example, doing objectives, which gives other supports, or survivors, more time to support their team, or other niche means, which we'll get to if they are applicable to the certain survivor they are mainly used by. Now, starting the tier list, and technically the worst survivor in Forsaken, which I believe is relatively misleading, is Noob. I believe that Noob is one of the most fair and honest survivors in the entire game, and I would say is the only survivor which is balanced quite well. His kit is quite bare bones, sticking to his survivalist archetype well, with great self-sustain through Boxer and Ghostburger to get you a lot of distance and avoid being detected respectively. This can make moves like Unstable Eye be futile against you, which, especially against killers which rely on good aura reading to know where you are, and be able to land projectiles well, like 1x, means that Noob's survivability against these killers is very good. As well as this, Bloxicola in general is just a great chase tool. It gets you a lot of distance, and especially when used on high stamina, can literally make you run faster than the killer for like a majority of your stamina bar, which is always appreciated. He also has more niche terms of support, which you probably already know, such as Shaletski being able to tank cool kid minions, or maybe even a niche example, baiting 1x minions edge map and then Shaletski to not take the damage, and also just bait them so they can't really be used to zone. But I think Noob's most prominent way of supporting his teammates is sandbagging. Now you might not know what sandbagging is, and I don't blame you because this is a very niche tech. And it is pretty much when you run your face into the killer, which stops them dead in their tracks. How this works is that the survivor and the killer have similar weights. This means that if you apply a force which is like enough to stop the killer because of your like decently high weight, then they're going to be stopped as well, and this can stall lots of time in chase for the person being chasing the survivor, and be the difference between living or dying in a round. While this isn't used a lot in public lobbies, if at all, this is a very prominent tech amongst high levels of play, which makes it which makes Noob a very good survivor in this regard. But what makes Noob such a good sandbagger? It's mainly because of his chase. You don't want to chase a Noob at all. His chase is simply too good with the essence of team support, which means you pretty much aren't going to be getting anything done, or are barely going to be getting anything done if you do chase him. Noobs can take advantage of this and sandbag willy-nilly. Before, you might be worried at the punishment of getting M1'd, or just taking lots more damage, or them even switching targets onto you might be an issue with sandbagging. Well, with Noob, they shouldn't really be doing this anyway, because if they try to commit in a chase with you, then they're gonna have to deal with upwards of 3 abilities which can deny damage, which is just insane. It's not just Noob's chase which makes him so good at sandbagging, however. It's also his abilities. Like I mentioned previously, his abilities can provide support in more niche ways, which sandbagging is one of them. What differentiates Noob's sandbagging from other survivors is his abilities. Shaletski can be used to nullify damage or potential M1s, which can in turn make you sandbag more because you have more HP to do so, or effective HP. And Ghostburger can disguise you into the surroundings and just make it harder to react to in general because of the invisibility fall. Both of these mean sandbagging can just get more value in general, and you could even argue that Bloxicola could also be used just in case they do switch onto you, and for bettering your positioning during the time which you need to sandbag in order to make it more effective. This overall just makes Noob a very niche but good support, which in the right hand can be very helpful to the team and even be the difference between someone living and surviving. Noob is often regarded as just a simple survivalist, which I simply cannot agree with. In the right hand, they can provide so much support, and as much as I do want to say that sandbagging is really powerful, in Noob's case, I feel like it's powerful but also balanced at the same time. Noob has counterplay, which the killer can play around, which is rare for many survivors, or rare in the sense that it's actually feasible to obtain, which is nice. For that reason, I think I'm going to put Noob in B tier. He's honestly just a really balanced survivor, and I don't think anything really needs to change about him. The recent changes with the movement speed reductions when consuming items is probably enough, and I mean, I don't really know what more to say. He's just a very well executed survivor. Well done Forsaken for making one good survivor. Conversely, I also believe that 2-time is deserving of B tier. This may appear very controversial to some people due to 2-time's very oppressive nature, second life, and notorious trick stabs. However, if the 2-time killer are on relatively low ping, which is what this tier list is assuming, then 2-time quickly fades from perceived S tier character to a low to mid B tier. But why is that? Well, for starters, they're extremely fragile, with an inconsistent and admittedly poor way of regaining back health. Because 2-time only has 80 max HP and doesn't have access to their second life at the start of the game, they need 2 backstabs, which involves getting very close to the killer, which, if executed poorly, can leave 2-time with little help afterwards to continue their oppression. 2-time needs all of their health to properly pressure the killer, otherwise they can be easily switched onto and killed. It's also quite simple to counter 2-time stealth playstyle, which is what they're intended to be played as it only takes looking around corners for when you know they'll stab to effectively kill all chances of them getting a sneaky backstab. While yes, you can abuse hitboxes and desync with 2-time, ping is a very important factor when doing such, and this also just usually involves a high level of ping. Usually people who don't live close enough to servers anyway and are getting more disadvantages for being a high ping than they are advantages. So, assuming both parties have relatively low ping, 2-time needs to play exceptionally risky and well to get backstabs, and if they want to play safe, go for fun stabs which, while are still good, usually puts the 2-time in a bad situation. As for the changes I would make to 2-time because of this, you could give them more stealth options and make crouch more accessible. So they aren't as easily countered by killers simply looking around behind a corner or two. This could involve increasing the crouch duration, speed and crouch, and the effects applied to 2-time exiting the crouch when they are nearby. This has somewhat already been done with the recent patch notes of buffing crouch a little bit, but I still believe that 2-time could use a little bit more, especially with how long the crouch cooldown is. It kind of decentivizes the whole stealthy playstyle, with having limited access to your main stealth ability. I do understand that this may be a little bit difficult to implement because of crouch lunge stabs, and if you make crouch too accessible, it can be easily abused for the undetectable, and just cycling of lunge stabs. But, if executed correctly, it could incentivize a healthier playstyle for a character. Also, if the Forsaken developers are that scared of trick stabbing, which I'm pretty sure we all know what that is, they could simply code it to where no stabs can't backstab, and only stabs which come from exiting crouch could stun. This doesn't have to be crouch stab or anything. This could be like exiting the crouch while you have the speed from being near the killer, which activates your backstab, which I think could be pretty interesting. However, it more so comes down to how 2-time's kit isn't very well designed, and the fact that they've already been reworked may possibly deter the developers from giving them another, which is also not a bad idea. I don't think giving 2-time another rework is bad, it's just the fact that they've already done it. So, the best changes you could currently make are the ones which blend the 2-time stealth more effectively. It will also still have something in chase due to crouch launch tabs, to being able to give the 2-time distance. This is just if you're worried that like they lose a significant part of the survivability to their trick stabs, and to a certain extent they do. But again, if executed correctly, and shouldn't be too bad. So, with all these reasons, I believe 2-time is an extremely fragile yet oppressive character, which, if you don't have very high levels of ping to abuse hitboxes and desync, is going to require a lot of skill to play, and just requires a lot of time in general to get the hang of, because 2-time is very different to other survivors, and it's I believe they are very difficult because of that. So, yeah, that's why I'm doing BTM.
Man, what the hell going on, man? These 3 women over here, they're going straight insane and destroying the whole restaurant.
Starting off A tier with, in my opinion, one of the most underrated survivors in the game is 0077. His original gimmick of tricking the killer has quickly vanished from optimal play now that his clone can generally just be used more in terms of body blocking and denying abilities altogether. This could be walks with override from Cool Kid, Nova Unforged from Noli, and even Digital Footprint from John Doe if you use it in a way which isn't actively detrimenting your team. However, even with these upsides, he's still quite matchup dependent, which can make his strength vary from each killer. While the utility on almost every round he is in is due to the clone being able to be used to sandbag, and arguably better than Noob, you can't really deny that using the clone to block a walks with override, a 47 damage move, which can make most survivors in the game, mostly supports, go down to almost half HP, is arguably more powerful than just one good sandbag. The weird thing too is that, as much as the N7 can counter some abilities most of the time, it isn't impossible to play around. Cool Kid, for example, could use it for some good distance by hitting the clone, and killers, like Noli, could still use the clone as a way to boost their rerush or increase the size of their Nova's explosion. However, if the N7 knows what they're doing, this can be more difficult to accomplish. So, a simple change to N7 would simply be to nerf the cursor clone specifically, since the other modes just don't really need a nerf. I think they're fine. This could be through a shorter duration or a higher cooldown when used, which both worsen his suppression, but not too much to where it completely kills his utility. Also, as more of a quality of life change for the killer, making the clone kill animation faster to just generally improve the pace of the game would also be a very nice touch, since I don't think anybody wants to go through an upwards of 4-second kill animation just because you accidentally killed a clone. These changes should be able to leave N7 in a healthy spot where he is still good overall, with his universal utility through using the clone to sandbag, but not nearly as hard of a counter against killers he is good against, like Noe and Cool Kid. With all this considered, this is why I'm putting 007 in A tier, as much as he does have some good matchups which can arguably put him in S tier, there are definitely some matchups which can make him worse than 2-time in some cases, so I think A tier is like the average for this character. However, unlike any other survivor on this tier list, I believe Shaletski might be the most misunderstood when it comes to balancing. On the surface, Shaletski might seem very powerful to some players. He has upwards of 100 effective HP, which is super easy to obtain with his chicken, as well as a stun which appears relatively versatile. However, once you analyze Shaletski's kit further, and seeing it be countered by any half-decent killers you may encounter, you begin to realize that Shaletski just isn't nearly as powerful as he might have been perceived as a couple months back. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, his chicken. If it wasn't for this ability, I'd honestly argue Shaletski would be a bomb of the battle survivor. This is mainly because his slash simply isn't that good at all, while his chicken is the complete opposite. As mentioned previously, the slash may appear relatively versatile on the surface, being able to stun at seemingly any time. But is this true? Unfortunately, not really. The main issue with slash comes from how reactable it can be and how power crapped it is in the current meta. A 0.5 second 5 wind up to a melee ability is already an issue. Keep in mind, the average human reaction time is roughly 0.25 seconds. If you're willing to get decent at any video game in general, this can quickly decrease below the 200s. Between the human reaction time and the slash, this can be over a 350 millisecond difference. However, you might argue that the killer still needs to run away, which is true. However, doing some simple calculations, between all the killers, they cover around 8.93 studs worth of distance in the time they have to run away from the slash before it hits them. As a reminder, Shed's slash range is roughly 5.25 to 5.5 studs in length. While yes, things like ping can affect how your hitbox drags his killer, and the windup, which can decrease of Shaletski's slash, with good enough reaction time, the upwards of 3.65 stud safety net you have means that Shaletski is just praying you don't pay attention if they try to stun you out of M-lag. Compared to other sentinels, this makes Shaletski very easy to power creep. Survivors like Chance and Jane Doe simply have better stuns with better range and generally just better ways to use them. Even Shaletski's slash at full potential is very hard to get value from when compared to these abilities. So, the only viable strategy, really, with Shaletski is stunning out of abilities and end lags, which, depending on the killer, can be very difficult to perform, and even then, get rallied from. The only saving grace for Shaletski really is his chicken, giving him so much burst HP, which is what allows him to be a viable option. He can be great for sandbagging because of this, and even body blocking, or just generally going for more risky slashes, which is what Shaletski desperately needs. So, the changes I would make to Shaletski, I believe, are quite obvious. I would buff his slash and nerf his chicken. The buff to slash could be a 0.0775 to 0.1 second reduction to the windup, and the nerf to chicken, to compensate, could be a decrease in 10 to 15 HP from the overall healing obtained. This way, Shaletski still keeps remnants of what his character is supposed to be, a tanky sentinel, while allowing him to still be able to stun more freely. This wouldn't change his position in the tier list from A tier, I don't think, but it would definitely make him more healthy and just be less power crap by other survivors overall. On the other hand, Chance also finds himself in A tier and who I believe is better than Shaletski. Now, let's just get the obvious thing out of the way with Chance. His potential is insanely high. He has upwards of 130 maximum HP, with good luck and a long range stun, which is undoubtedly the most powerful stun in the game, given it does come out. It excels at stunning and lags and is arguably the best for stunning mid-chase, as you can take advantage of good positioning and stealth to hit them consistently, even on aware killers. The main issue with Chance really is his RNG factor. But, let me just preface this. I don't think Chance being revolved around luck or taking risks is particularly bad. It's what makes him somewhat balanced in the current meta. The issue really is just what Chance can do given they get good luck, and how hard they can be to counter subsequently. I don't think it takes a genius to say a long range stunner who can both sandbag and body block for his teammates with high HP and have the best stun in the game if he gets good enough luck is completely fair or balanced. So, the main change I would make to Chance is his reroll. Firstly, I would cap the maximum HP he's able to obtain to roughly 110 or simply 100. This means Chance can still have good survivability if they get above average or average luck, but also doesn't make him infuriating to go against given he has insane RNG. However, another change I would make to reroll is increasing its cooldown by roughly 7 seconds to 10 seconds. The main reason why I'm making this change is to incentivize more chances to not reroll their HP as much during the early game and stick with lower max HP in order to use their shot more. Otherwise, if they do spend more time rerolling at the early game to get a higher maximum HP, they take away a resource from their team, which can be the difference between losing or winning a round. However, since these are pretty harsh nerfs, you could buff his gun's range by 10 to 15 studs to help with positioning or stun duration slightly to compensate. However, since the stun is already quite powerful anyway, this doesn't really need to be done, and the original changes should encourage more team-based gameplay for the character anyway. After all, that's what Chance is supposed to be. This would also keep his spot in the tier list at a high/mid A, while making it more healthy in the long run of the game. At the top of A tier lies Veronica. Even though she has experienced a multitude of nerfs ever since her first introduction into the game, she has been extremely oppressive to the killer with both her insane survivability and team support she is able to give. The main thing which makes her so strong in my opinion is how much team support she can dish out alone. I think it makes sense for Veronica to have very good chases because she is a survivalist after all, and needs to prepare beforehand in order to get said good chase. Also, a lot of her sprays are going to be used in the open when trying to support her team, which reduces her level of survivability to a healthy amount as there will just be generally less sprays for her to piggyback off of in order to reset chase. However, the fact that she can dish out so much knockback quite frequently is quite unhealthy. Because of this, the main change I would make to Veronica is nerfing the amount of distance the killer is shoved by a little bit and increasing the global cooldown by 5 seconds. This means you still have a good chase reset up your sleeve, though isn't as difficult to play around as before to make it more balanced. I would also then decrease the amount of barrier acquired from before moves like bump rope base by 5%, making the Veronica get less battery from interacting with the killer and force them to have more downtime by doing generators and spam tricking to get battery. However, if these changes are a little too harsh, an innate resistance while in bumper by like 20% or so could make it less punishing to perform, and possibly slightly more battery when doing generators and spam tricking as well could help circumvent the issues and make it so she can support the team slightly more, with just generally more effective HP. With these changes, I believe Veronica will be easier to play around, while still maintaining her main strength of having an insanely good chase if fully repaired, and good team support if the same is apparent. This would also leave her at a high/mid A tier spot in the tier list, as she would still fit her role quite well and be very useful to a team, with a great survivability but also great team support. Starting off S tier, we have guest 1 through 7, and if I'm going to be entirely honest, I've never seen such an impressive character in an asymmetrical game before. Well, there might be some which outclass him, but guest 1 through 7 plays way too well into his archetype of denying damage and resetting chases. Firstly, his charge already makes him insanely strong. Not only is it a good tool for yourself in chase, as the thunder knockback it applies simply generates free distance between the guest and the killer, but this is also especially significant when the guest is regenerating stamina when low, giving them quite a bit of stamina just from shoving the killer. However, not only is this effective to use it on yourself, but it's also a borderline chase resetter for other survivors once performed due to how the charge impedes stamina efficiency. The killer not only is knocked back, but then also has to re-accelerate as they are stunned. Therefore, this just in turn wastes so much stamina, and I think it's roughly 20, to where you can quite comfortably get a good stamina advantage as the survivor from just charging the killer alone. However, it's not just guest charge which already makes him quite strong in the hands of a good player. You also have to worry about block, which is a whole nother can of worms. It would be impossible to document the plethora of uses block has due to how versatile of an ability it is, but some uses include, but are not limited to, drag blocking, reacting to the killer's M1 to get a guaranteed punch, applying pressure to the block by staying on top of a chase survivor, which just makes swinging as the killer a huge gamble as they can react, drag, predict, and so on, and ended up denying moves such as walk speed override and even Nobody's void rush. If this doesn't appear as broken to you due to the sheer amount of pressure which can be applied just by existing as a guest, then I don't know what will. Honestly, this character's kit is designed so poorly, I don't even know what to suggest. Charge is the only somewhat balanced and interesting move, while literally everything else about him, his insane pressure, survivability, and max health, create an unstoppable force within the right hands. This is one of the few characters who desperately needs a rework, since I have no clue how you would balance guest 1 through 7 in a way which would either kill the character, or make him way less fun to play, or make him at all healthy for the environment of this game. If this wasn't enough to persuade you that guest is a pretty strong S tier, then I don't know what will. If guest is to enter a healthy or somewhat balanced state at all, then he is going to need some very severe changes, and like I mentioned previously, the only way this is really going to be done is most likely a rework, so I hope the developers can come up with a pretty decent idea, since I think guest 1 through 7 has a lot of creative freedom. I just don't think this kit is the way to do it, man. He needs some changes. Moving on to the support, which, to no surprise, are arguably the strongest survivors in the game, we have Taph, who I honestly view as kind of like 7 and 7, an extremely underrated survivor. This guy is crazy, to say the least. Insanely low cooldowns with both his tripwire and trip mine, with the trip mine even getting a reduced cooldown if it connects, and many techniques like shoelacing to boot. Shoelacing is when you just build a huge unbreakable tripwire and just hold it until the killer is about to cross through it. Now, for some reason, the tripwire gets iframes once it is first built, but it's still able to be activated during this time, so the killer either has to go to the tripwire and, because they're unable to destroy it, get the slowness, or have to wait out the iframes before being able to break it to avoid the slowness. Either way, it's just a lose-lose, and most of the time it's just a chase reset because of how much distance you're able to pull with it. However, even with good setups, it's insanely hard to counter Taph unless they are targeted, due to low cooldowns and having to deal with literally every other survivor. As well as this, they have the most survivability out of any other support with 100 HP, which makes them even harder to turn around and kill. So, with all of this considered, Taph will be seeing some very hefty nerfs. First, their max HP will go from 100 to 90 because I don't think any support should have 100 HP, just gives them way too much survivability. Then, the iframes the tripwire get when it is just built will be completely removed to get rid of shoelacing completely. Not only is shoelacing just extremely stupid, but also removes a lot of the skill expression from Taph by having to use unique, creative setups to stop the killer in their tracks. Also, the cooldown for the tripwire will be increased by 10 seconds, and subsequently the trip mine by 5 seconds. This makes it so Taph's cooldowns are more encouraged to be used in conjunction compared to now, which is just tripwire cycling due to shoelacing. And hopefully, with these changes, Taph will be able to still be decently strong, but a lot more manageable than before, taking longer to support the team and having less survivability to make him a decent tunnel. These should put him in like roughly A tier, I would predict, but right now, if nothing is really done, he's going to stay a solid S tier with how much he is able to support the team, and just like, you don't even have to really think much with this guy as long as you have good coordination like with your team, because you can really just shoelace and there's not really much the killer can really do. And even if you are playing with like just not the best teammates, for example, and you lack coordination, you can still put setups like trip mines, for example, through walls and pair them with tripwires, which can just give the killer a chase reset, which is completely unavoidable, unless you spend so much time breaking the setup, which by then you've already generated so much distance, it practically has the same result. However, there are still survivors stronger than Taph, one of those being Builderman. Builderman is pretty much just Taph, but now has an even simpler chase reset and global healing. There's nothing really interesting about Builderman, to be honest. As much as I love this character, to say he is strong would be an understatement. A chase reset in the pocket and unlimited healing for the entire team is something which is insanely powerful, to say the least. As well as this, there are even some techniques some people don't know, and some people may call this sentry cycling. This is pretty much when you just try to spam the sentry as much as possible and use as much as possible to stall as much time as you possibly can. This is especially effective against killers which can have the pressure denied almost immediately by one resource, and sentry is one of them. So, how would I fix Builderman? Well, his main issue mainly comes down to sentry. To be honest, even though the dispenser has a lot of potential, the idea you'd have to deliberately stay in one spot for over 30 seconds in most cases, honestly makes it decently balanced. The only thing I'd really change about the dispenser is to cap its healing to each survivor to roughly 40 to 50 health. This is so Builderman doesn't have nearly as much pressure on killers, but also keeps within the idea that the survivors have to practically do nothing for 40 to 50 seconds just to heal. You could also tweak the healing rate by a tiny bit, but I think how it would work with the healing limit is fine. Now, for sentry, I would simply make it so the sentry is capped at a 45-second cooldown until the sentry is destroyed. This may seem like an insane nerf, but it isn't nearly as bad as you think. If Builderman has this change, it would encourage more precise sentry cycling, kind of like tripwire cycling. With the current meta with Builderman is to simply spam sentries as much as possible for the most amount of chase resets and time stalled. So, if you were to add this change to Builderman, it would make it so, to get insane value out of him like now, you'd have to coordinate well with your team to get the same amount of power as you do now. However, if it really is that harsh, which I somewhat doubt, you could always decrease the cooldown of the sentry by around 5 to 10 seconds to compensate. However, keeping it how it is would make Builderman a lot more interesting than he is now, and prevents the Builderman from stalling too much time even if sentries go unused for most of the match. Or, you could just do the obvious thing and rework his kit, since out of any of the survivor, he's by far the least played, or at least I think it is, because I barely see this guy in public lobbies, and least enjoyable for most players. However, I don't believe that this is entirely necessary as compared to survivors like Guest, due to how he can still remain balanced without it. However, I still think it would just be better because out of any other survivor in this game, Builderman does just seem the most bare bones and boring, so I think a rework would do him fine. However, in his current state, he is a very strong S tier, but with these changes, he should be able to be a pretty healthy A tier character if coordinated and used properly. While both Taph and Builderman are amazing at more passive forms of support, Dusekkar is arguably the most aggressive / oppressive out of any other support in this game. His Plasma Beam, which for some reason got buffed, can be a complete chase reset just by hitting the survivor alone, more so if you hit the killer as well, which isn't hard. And his shield can outright deny any sort of punishment of mistakes from the survivor's end. More so, The shield can be used to allow the survivor to be able to generate more stamina and possibly store for other resources, like a stun, very effectively. Especially how it can almost always do this now, because the change of the shield breaking instead of being able to go through it if the survivor is low HP. Now, like other supports, it is difficult to balance Dusekkar with the state he is in. While he has crazy team support, his chase is relatively weak when compared to most other characters. However, this can be easily circumvented and can make trying to go against the Dusekkar at all extremely difficult. All it really takes is one competent Dusekkar and another survivor to provide support to give to you for a real run for your money, especially if there are multiple Dusekkars or multiple survivors willing/able to support him. Now, because it's only Dusekkar supportive capabilities which are the main issue, the only real thing you would need to change is how much they can support and how much effect it has. Dusekkar's playstyle is fine, it's relatively engaging and fun, just way too powerful at times. So, a simple increase in his cooldowns by roughly 10 seconds for both abilities and reverting the other health buff Dusekkar had recently gotten to his plasma beam, 20 to 30, should make him less oppressive but still rewarding if your abilities are used correctly. Remember, a well-timed shield or a good double beam can be the difference alone between a chase, extension and death, let alone the fact he can cycle the ability extremely well. As well as this, you might also want to change how much movement speed he has when using his abilities. This can make it harder to get into positions of which you can make these abilities extremely oppressive and just make Dusekkar more counterable in general. However, with these changes, he should be around like mid to low A, which will put him into a pretty healthy state in terms of balancing. Lastly, to the surprise of absolutely no one, we have Elliot as the best survivor in the game. You've heard everyone say it, and it's like beating a dead horse at this point. Really good support with upwards of 40 HP healing, with a really good self-sustain which outperforms even those who are designed specifically to be good in chases. What more could you ask for? I think a good example of this as well is when you compare Rush Hour to Noob's Bloxy. Both get you relatively the same distance, but Noob's Bloxy has 10 seconds extra cooldown, 2 to 3 seconds wind up of where you are completely vulnerable, has limited ways of which it can be used as compared to Rush Hour, which has no wind up at all and can be used at any time, and on the whole is a trade-off for having no ways to support the team, while Elliot has an upwards of a 40 HP heal. If Elliot is competing with survivors literally designed to have insanely good chases, then I don't know how people think Elliot is still balanced. You pretty much have all the attributes needed to be an extremely broken survivor. So, what's the best thing that can be done to Elliot? Well, a tweak to his pizza and heavy nerf to his Rush Hour is most likely needed if he is going to at all grace anything below S tier. I would just nerf the caps of the healing on the pizza to 30, make the base heal 20, and make Jans add plus 2 HP to heal. This, in conjunction with the recent bug fix, which made it so Elliot doesn't have to be the one doing the gens in order to get the passive, could encourage the team to work on more objectives, as if they don't do this now, to make sure Elliot has good support. Then, for Rush Hour, there are lots of ideas you could do for it. Some people say that you can make Rush Hour like Adrenaline from Death, make it slow you after use, and slow on. Anything really which nerfs how much distance it gets you, or how readily accessible it is, will probably be enough to make the ability a lot more balanced in the long term, and not be able to compete with abilities specifically designed to help those who are meant to have good chasers. This means Elliot has less survivability overall as compared to before, because right now, even one Rush Hour alone can cause Elliot's self-sustain to be better than survivors specifically built around it. With these changes, Elliot should be more manageable support, and make it so he fits his identity of being a self-supporting support, without the insane amount of oppression he has currently. However, kind of like Dusekkar, if these changes aren't implemented soon, Elliot is still most likely going to be the best character in the game and cement his spot in S tier for quite some time. However, as this video is being made, Jane Doe was released. Jane is a very interesting survivor. She has a built-in 40% damage reduction for upwards of half her gross HP, as well as arguably one of the best stuns in the game. To cut to the chase, Jane Doe is quite strong. Out of all the Sentinels, she is by far the best when it comes to stunning. She doesn't have the issue Shaletski may have, for example, with a reactable slash, as she has a lunge. She also doesn't have the issue Chance has with RNG, nor does she have the issue with always being at risk. All you need to do is stir your crystal and begin to pressure once you have resonance applied, and After that, the upwards of 50 total health you have with the max shat point, which is currently quite easy to gain, helps a lot when confirming the stun. Also, hitting the stun in general just gives Jane a lot of shatter points, pretty much maximum if a stun is landed with 3 charges. The main issue with Jane really is that she can be quite difficult to counter. The best form of counterplay is to tunnel around as, while his solo chase isn't the worst, it can be slightly below average at times against certain killers. But, even then, some matchups like Sixer, Noli, and Slasher are also quite hard countered by Jane and gives her a good solo chase. Sixer's big hitbox and end lags makes it easy to land crystals and stuns. Noli's Void Rush can just be completely countered, and Slasher, while being the weakest matchup out of these 3, can still be hit with a crystal plus axe combo once leaving Reggie base. However, even with other killers, all Jane really needs is some extra resources to be able to do just as well. So, if you leave her alone so you can chase other survivors, you are having to deal with an extremely oppressive stun and large sums of effective HP to actually make any progress in the game. The only real time Jane is runnable is when she doesn't have a shatter point, though with the built-in damage reduction, this can be hard to chip down when trying to chase someone else. Keep in mind, this shatter point is able to tank whole massive factions, walk speed overrides, and gashing moves, given you have the shatter point for it. Also, even if you do break the shatter point because of this, the Jane has already done a job on switching the chase onto her 9 times out of 10, which can make it difficult to chip down the survivor you are actually targeting. So, the main thing I think Jane needs is a nerf to her effective HP. This can be in the form of nerfing the damage reduction shatter point gives, or nerfing how much she is able to obtain. This way, Janes have to be more cautious when supporting, as the axe is more valuable and they can be easily switched onto if their shatter points break if they aren't careful. Also, as more of a quality of life change for the killer, the resonance stun should be tweaked a little bit. This is definitely a nitpick, but the killer being stunned for upwards of 4.5 seconds is excessive and just slows down the pace of the game for seemingly no reason. These changes should make Jane still decently strong, and make it so she isn't as nearly as powerful as support as she is currently. But if anybody's wondering where she is currently, I'd say she's still S tier, but below guest. Definitely being on the lower end of S tier by a lot, but still having the capability to where she is very hard to counter for good players using her. In conclusion, it's pretty safe to say that this game isn't very balanced. If it didn't take 6 survivors being S tier to tell you that this game is unbalanced, then I really don't know what will. It doesn't help either that many killers simply do not have the resources to do much against the survivors, meaning, if the survivor and killer are on roughly the same skill level, it's hard for the killer to do practically anything. I might make a killer tier list too after this one if this one gets a decent amount of attention, to hopefully help the killers as well. As much as survivors being balanced could help out the killers, some would still be pretty weak, like Slasher, and still require attention. So, all I can really say now is, thanks for watching, genuinely. This is one of the first highly edited YouTube videos I've made, and you watching until the end genuinely means a lot to me. I'm glad that, even though we might have disagreed on some things, you've been willing to hear me out the whole video, and are at least a little bit more knowledgeable about the game as a whole. Also, to go off script a little bit here, if you want any of the credits for the soundtracks used in this video, then you can just check the description, and also the people who helped me make this video and give me feedback will also be in the description as well, and you know who you are, and thank you a lot for helping out this video. It really does mean a lot. So, I think that's everything I have to say. I'm hoping in the future this game can be more balanced, and yeah. So yeah.